The street Petersburg of the 1860s. Narrow sidewalks covered in mud. Despite the summer heat, the air is heavy and humid. Bad smells of sewers and human sweat mingle together. Workers sit on street corners with empty stomachs, stray dogs wander the streets, and rotting wooden houses line the alleys. The city is both crowded and lonely. In one of the most secluded corners of this city lives a former student in a low-ceilinged, yellow-walled, airless room. His name is Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov. His room is so small that just a few steps separate his bed from the door. The narrow window lets in almost no light, and the cracked plaster gives off a moldy smell. Crushed under the weight of poverty, Raskolnikov's mind never rests. Yet it is filled not only with books but also with dark thoughts. He cannot sleep at night. He stares at the ceiling for hours, whispering to himself. Some people are not bound by ordinary rules. What troubles Raskolnikov's mind is not merely poverty or hunger. Deep inside him, for days a single thought keeps turning a theory about extraordinary people. According to this idea, certain people, like Napoleon, have the right to commit great deeds. If shedding blood will ultimately benefit humanity, then even murder may be justified for them, since such people stand above the moral laws binding ordinary men. Raskolnikov examines this theory obsessively. He asks himself, if I were such a person, if one death could save hundreds of lives, would I hesitate? What begins as a philosophical speculation slowly turns into a dangerous plan. There is an old pawnbroker woman in the city known to everyone. Alyona Ivanovna lends money to the poor, taking their belongings at miserable rates. She is stingy, unpleasant, and cruel. One day, Raskolnikov visits her to pawn a small gold watch. While there, he studies everything carefully: the lock and chain on the door, the nails on the wall, the position of the chest, and the size of the room, and convinces himself that her death would not harm, but rather benefit society. Perhaps for the first time, he feels that the murder could be justified. A few days later, he overhears two men at a tavern saying the same thing, that the old woman's death would be a blessing. These words unlock the door in his mind. Now the plan is clear. He rehearses it for days: when to go, what to wear, how to hide the axe. He will borrow the axe from his neighbor and conceal it under an old coat. To gain the woman's trust, he will bring another small item to pawn. When the moment comes, he will strike. Yet each calculation brings a new doubt. On one side is fear. On the other, the burning desire to prove himself an extraordinary man. He tells himself, if I cannot do this, then both the theory and I are nothing but a dream. That day, a heavy summer heat hangs over Petersburg. Raskolnikov wakes early but cannot get up. Only one thought fills his mind: today it will happen. He hides the axe under his coat, takes a piece of rope and a small package wrapped in brown paper, and walks toward Alyona Ivanovna's home. His heart races with every step. He fears being recognized. He avoids eye contact. When he arrives, the woman is alone. Using his package as a pretext, he draws her toward the table. As she bends to examine the item, the axe rises and falls. 1, 2, 3 blows, and she collapses. His breathing quickens. Sweat drips from his forehead. Suddenly, the door opens. Lizaveta, the woman's sister, walks in. Her eyes widen in horror. Unable to speak, she freezes. In panic, Raskolnikov attacks her too. At that moment, the path of return is sealed. He searches the place quickly, finds a small amount of money and some valuables. Just as he's about to leave, he hears footsteps on the stairs. Terror almost paralyzes him. He hides behind the door, listening. The sounds fade away. He slips down the steps and out into the street. Every face seems to look at him with suspicion. When he finally reaches home, his hands tremble. He hides the bloodied tools and conceals the stolen items inside a crack in the wall. The days after the murder blur together. He develops a fever, mutters deliriously in bed. In his dreams, Alyona rises from the wall, and Lizaveta stands silently beside her. Outside, he feels watched from every corner. He overhears a conversation. The door was open. There was someone there. His heart pounds violently. One evening, he enters a tavern. There he meets Marmeladov, a symbol of poverty and despair. Drunk and broken, Marmeladov tells how his family starves and how his daughter Sonya has sold herself to buy bread. Raskolnikov feels a mix of pity and anger. Yet Sonya's name stays in his mind. Soon after, Marmeladov is struck and killed by a carriage. and Raskolnikov helps carry him home. Marmeladov dies in Sonya's arms. The event awakens guilt and a longing to redeem himself, but his crime still overshadows everything. His only friend is Razumikhin, a cheerful, generous man who supports him during his illness, brings food, and tries to lift his spirits. His brightness is a sharp contrast to Raskolnikov's darkness. The investigator, Porfiry Petrovich, is clever and calm, with a knowing smile. When he questions Raskolnikov, he never accuses him directly. Instead, he probes his thoughts with subtle questions, leaving sting-like words in his mind. During another interview, Porfiry delves deeper into Raskolnikov's theories and the morality of murder. Though Raskolnikov tries to appear calm, the sweat on his forehead betrays him. Luzhin, who seeks to marry Raskolnikov's sister Dunya, is a selfish opportunist more interested in convenience than love. Raskolnikov confronts him, exposing his motives, and tension grows between them. Svidrigailov, Dunya's former employer, is known for his immorality and dark charm. In his cryptic conversations with Raskolnikov, it is unclear whether he knows about the murder. Raskolnikov visits Sonya in her small room, where she reads the Bible. To him, she represents mercy and faith. She reads the story of Lazarus's resurrection, a symbol, perhaps, of Raskolnikov's own spiritual rebirth. Porfiry later suggests that he may know Raskolnikov is the murderer, but leaves him to wrestle with his conscience. Each encounter disturbs him more deeply. Svidrigailov corners Dunya, proposing marriage. She rejects him and threatens him with a gun. Soon after, he takes his own life. Sonya finally confronts Raskolnikov, implying she knows his crime. She urges him to confess. Share your suffering with others. Only then can you be free. Though he resists, inwardly he feels she is right. In his final meeting with Porfiry, the inspector tells him plainly that he should turn himself in. Overwhelmed by guilt and Sonya's tears, Raskolnikov walks to the police station and confesses his crime. He is sentenced to hard labor in Siberia. There, through long days of toil in frozen winds, Sonya remains by his side. Over the months, Raskolnikov's soul begins to change. He realizes that his theory of extraordinary men was nothing but arrogance. True freedom comes only through conscience. And Dostoevsky closes with these words: For Raskolnikov, a new story was beginning, but that belonged to another time.